Okay, we're back from executive session, and no action was taken in either the HR executive session or the legal affairs executive session. At this time, we're going to continue with the HR
All right, I'll read the
committee.
HR. Again, no action has been taken in executive session. And you have before you a resolution to appoint Ken Lott as corporate secretary. So I'll entertain a motion to approve. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries. There's no further business for HR, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Stand adjourned.
Okay. At this time, we'll call the regular board meeting of Santee Cooper to order, and I'd like to welcome everyone here today. First thing I'd like to do is ask, I've invited the mayor of Andrews, South Carolina, to our meeting, Frank McCleary, and Frank is going to lead us in our prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. And so before we do that, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background on Frank. I did not know Frank growing up. He's a few years younger than me. We both went to Andrews High School. I think he graduated in '82, and then from Benedict College in '86, and served in the U.S. Army for, is it 29 years?
29 years, that's
29 years, combat veteran, and I thought it would only be appropriate to have him lead us here today. And I'd also like to thank him for all his hard work for the town of Andrews. You know, Frank could have gone anywhere after serving in the Army, decided to come back to home where he grew up, and is providing a huge public service to the town of Andrews. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, and I'll let you lead us.
Okay, thank you, sir. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the invitation to come in. It's an honor to be here and to be among the great leaders here in South Carolina. And not just me, I ask that everyone participating in the Veterans program this weekend. We will have our parade and those things. So please take the opportunity to thank those hardworking Americans for the sacrifices they have made. So I've been asked to lead the Invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will do so. So please bow your heads with me, please. Father, we humbly come before you, inviting your presence and guidance as we conduct the business of this fine company in South Carolina. We pray that the decisions made here in this forum will have a positive impact on all served and led by Santee Cooper. We ask then for your travel mercies as we depart this place back to our various destinations. These things we ask in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, first up on the agenda will be the adoption of the minutes of August 19th and September 9th. Do I have a motion to approve? Moved. Second? All in favor? Aye. Okay. And next up will be the presentation by the Finance Committee, and I'll call on Chairman Wynn.
Mr. Chairman, the Finance Committee met and approved a resolution on celebrating the season, and we're submitting that to the board for approval.
Do I have a motion to approve?
I would add that this is a wonderful program for the community, and I would enjoy moving approval on this.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Any discussion? I absolutely agree. It's a great program, and it's a wonderful contribution that Santee Cooper makes, not only to the community, but the nonprofits to benefit from this as well. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, I'll call on Chairman Singleton of the HR Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. HR Committee met this morning and approved a resolution to appoint Ken Lott as Corporate Secretary. and we submit that for approval.
Okay, do I have a motion? Second?
I have a question. I just want to make sure. Sandra, are you okay with having a new boss? Are you okay with that?
I've worked with him before.
Okay, all right.
All right.
Good.
Well, in that case, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. And congratulations. Okay. And next up, actually, we're going to call on Pamela Williams for a financial and line of business report.
I will be reporting the results for the third quarter ended September 30th, 2019. And in this, we'll be comparing either to the same period last year or to the budget, depending on the slide. Oops. So first item on the agenda is our balance sheet highlights. Oops. Okay, thank you. Few items to point out on the balance sheet. No large changes from this time last year. We're comparing to September 30th, 2018. On the utility plant, the major driver there, increase in utility plant, is work on our solid waste landfill. And then a few other items on here are really all related to the same thing, the move in the total current assets, the long-term debt, and the regulatory liabilities. Those are where we're utilizing cash on the asset side from the Toshiba funds to pay down debt or defease debt, and then and where we're amortizing that regulatory liability. So those three items are the bigger ticket items on here that are moving, and they're all related. And we will talk about the earnings on a future slide. If we look at some of our key financial metrics, again, these are the metrics looked at by the rating agencies that are more financial in nature. So they look at a number of other metrics, but these are the more financial type metrics. And what we are doing here is looking at how Santee Cooper compares to what those, what an A rating would be for the credit rating agencies. And we primarily use the Moody's methodology here. And so we continue to meet the A criteria when we look at our rates in the region compared to other utilities. On the days liquidity on hand, they require 90 days for an A rating, and as of September 30th, we were at 477 days. That number's come down some. I don't have the exact number, but we did a cash defeasement in October, so this does not reflect that. The debt to equity ratio as of September 30th was 75-25, and which is right in the range for the A category. And then on our debt service coverage, the A category for the rating agencies for that is a 1.5, and we are trending below that at 1.37. So they all average out to where we're still in the A category. Next, we'll take a look at our capital and construction compared to our budget. And we're running a little bit below budget on our capital spending. That's fairly typical this time of year. It's been catching up as we've gone. Projections show that we'll probably be slightly under budget on capital spending for the year when we get to December. So now we'll take a step into looking at our earnings statement, and we'll look at our combined revenues. We're right at budget on the combined system revenues, and that would include changes that we're seeing in fuel costs and changes that we're seeing in sales. So sales are slightly below budget. Fuel costs are a little bit below budget. So we'll see that our actual revenues are slightly below budget as well. If we move on to our expenses, you can see that our fuel and purchase power number is running below budget. And that is largely driven by our fuel rate being below budget and also by the sales being below budget a little bit. Weather's just a little bit milder than it was this time last year. Our O&M expenses year to date are a little bit below budget, but we do expect that to catch up by the end of the year. And that will include, amongst other things, the payment that we made to the Department of Administration. So that's not all rolled into this yet. We'll be expensing that as we get the billing from them, if you will, showing that they've spent the monies. So that will roll into this, and it'll also include any expenditures that we are making on our reform proposal and consultants and whatnot for that. So we do expect that to catch up. If we look at our generation by fuel type, you can see that coal is a little bit below budget and purchase power is above budget. So we're purchasing a little bit more than we had projected to because the prices are lower. And you can see in the top left-hand corner there, or right-hand corner, that our fuel cost per kilowatt hour in all categories is below budget. So that's a very positive for us. And down at the bottom, you can see that sales are running, I believe that number is maybe 2.5% below what we had in the budget for sales. So weather has been just a little milder than normal. And so all that equates to our reinvested earnings number. Again, revenues are pretty much on track, and total expenses are slightly below budget there. And so the net result is a stronger reinvested earnings than we had budgeted for. The next view is a customer impact view, and here we kind of shift over to more of a rate type view. Biggest difference here is that instead of having depreciation in our numbers, we now have full debt service, which would include the principal piece, and principal is included in rates rather than depreciation. So other than that, the numbers are all right in line with the numbers that you saw before. Debt service is just slightly over what we had in the budget, and then O&M again is below budget, and fuel and purchase power is also below budget. The main takeaway here is that our total cost per kilowatt hour is running below budget, and it's about 3.5% below what we had budgeted for that cost per kilowatt hour year to date. So a nice strong number there. And then lastly, we have our water system. Our debt service is a little bit higher than what we had budgeted. They had planned a defeasance of some debt, which we have not done yet. And then on the O&M, that's running quite a bit below budget for the O&M. And that's mainly driven by lower consumption on the water side. So if we look at our total on the water from a cost per thousands of gallons basis, again, that is a good bit below budget at about 6% below what we had budgeted there. So another nice strong number coming in there on that cost per thousands of gallons. So that about wraps up the third quarter report. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you, Suzanne.
Okay, thank you.
That wraps up your report? Okay, all right.
That's great performance in light of everything we've been through in the last 6 months.
It is. It's a great performance, and David and I attended a meeting in Horry County a few days ago, and Mark made the comment to the group that our fuel cost or our cost of service to our customers, particularly on the commercial, cooperative, and industrial customers, has been basically flat for the last 5 years. And with our new budget and business plan, will continue to be basically flat for the next 5 years. I think it's past 7 years, 7 years.
7 years for.
Plus the additional, so basically 12 years of stable rates for those customers, which is incredible. If there are no other questions at this time, I'll call on Mark Bonsall to give the President's report.
Okay, I'm going to start, if I might, with the President's report by asking Shawan to give a presentation on the financing activities, both the cash defeasance and the proposed refinancing. So, Shawan? I think we've got some overheads. See them up there.
Good morning, everyone. Chairman Ray, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Mr. Bonsall, and executive staff, when we spoke to you about our proposed 2019 financial transactions in August, we told you that we had 4 goals in mind. We wanted a significant reduction in nuclear debt. We sought to optimize cash, to refund many bonds for savings, and to preserve flexibility within our debt service program. We also represented to you that following these transactions, our metrics would continue to fall within the A rating band based on the Moody's methodology. I wanted to come and speak to you this morning about the outcome of the defeasance and the plan for the 2019 refunding to address the remaining mini bonds. So as you can see, with regard to the pay down of nuclear debt, on August 16th, we executed a $361 million pay down par of debt, approximately $336 million of which were nuclear bonds. So pre-transaction, we had just a hair under $4 billion in nuclear debt. And post-transaction, we have $3.6 billion in nuclear debt. As a result of some restrictions placed on the transaction by the Department of Administration as we go through this process, there were some non-nuclear bonds that were brought into the defeasance as well. Those were mini bonds, roughly $24 million. So we've gone from just a hair over $3 billion in non-nuclear debt to just under $3 billion in non-nuclear debt, for a total of $6.62 billion outstanding overall debt. To accomplish the transaction, we used internal funds, and we talked about that in detail in August, but we used the revenue fund. We depleted the Toshiba fund, which prior to the transaction had $144 million in that fund. We used portions of the special reserve fund, particularly those funds that had accreted funds for the CAB accretion, the accretion of CAB mini bonds, the capital improvement fund, and we also depleted the debt reduction fund, which prior to the defeasance had $112 million, creating debt service reduction over the life of that debt of $411 million. With regard to credit rating agency transactions, as Suzanne already mentioned, at year-end, our projected debt service coverage will be 1.37. We historically have targeted 1.4, so fairly close there. Days cash on hand, which Moody's does not calculate, but for which we set a target because it's a part of the liquidity metric. We have historically targeted 155 days, and we're projecting to end the year at 149 days, despite not making the 155 target, which we anticipated. Our days liquidity on hand will in fact continue to meet the Moody's A rating metric. Again, Suzanne mentioned a minimum of 90 days. We are well in excess of that at 161 days. Suzanne, having just stood up, you'll notice a pretty big discrepancy in the, I think, 477-day number that she gave and the number that I'm showing you. And there are a couple of drivers for that. As Suzanne mentioned, her numbers would not have included the defeasance as that occurred in October, and her numbers were as of September 30th. But also you might recall that we discussed the TD line and the inability to draw under that facility. And so our number does not take into account any facility under which we are at risk for the ability to draw on those lines. So this is a true access to cash number. And moving on to the proposed variable rate debt bond transaction, which we hope will close on November 14th, subject to the board's approval, of course, is currently sized at $150 million, but we are planning to add some commercial paper to that transaction. Economically, it makes sense, and it will also allow us a little more room in that commercial paper program to make draws as needed. So that will size up to approximately $165 million from the $150 you see here. Also important to note that when we refund this debt, we are not scoop and chucking. This is the refunding debt will match the maturities of the refunded debt. So no extension of the debt here. These savings are purely economically driven. It's a 20-year tenor. Because it's a variable rate, that's the VR and VRDB, it will have a weekly rate reset. That's the mode we'll be in. Projected rate initially was 2.5% on that debt, although I will note that the SIFMA to which the variable rate is indexed has dropped 40 basis points from the time we originally made this analysis. So assuming the spread stayed the same, you could see in the neighborhood of a 40 basis point drop initially on the rate for the outstanding new variable rate bonds. Again, refunding these bonds will close out the mini bond program, including those mini bonds that are subject to the Turca lawsuit, which is ongoing right now. The debt service reduction as a result of this transaction is $33 million net present value over the life of that debt. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Understanding that we have some restrictions placed on us by Department of Administration.
Yes, sir.
As a result of the Act 95.
Mm-hmm.
If we did not have those restrictions, would we have issued variable rate debt or fixed rate debt?
Initially, Chairman, we were looking at a fixed rate program. That is typically what Santee Cooper does. But in a world where we were looking to increase variable rate, this is a very attractive program. We might have done it slightly differently, perhaps done a monthly reset as opposed to a weekly reset. But we are no worse off by any means as a result of doing this as a variable rate from an interest rate perspective.
But in response to your question, Chairman, the initial intent was in fact a fixed rate transaction that had kind of standard call provisions associated with it and normal call provisions on a fixed rate bond of that tenor would be about 10 years. And we did enter that discussion with the DOA, and they expressed concern about the call protection creating basically a kind of a new liability for a potential bidder, and ask us as a result to come up with a different structure to eliminate that concern, and this is the structure that eliminates that concern. So that's why we're doing it this way in particular.
And then did we have to downsize the refunding because of any restrictions, or is this the optimal size refunding?
We did not have to downsize it.
Okay. We did not downsize the refunding, but we also aren't issuing any new money.
Okay. So at the end of the day, what we have, we're achieving savings.
Yes, sir.
But we do have rate risk because it is variable rate.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and assuming July comes and goes and market indicates we would certainly be looking at fixing out the bonds if that proved appropriate.
We'll just have additional transaction costs.
We'll just have additional transaction costs. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And so what the result of these transactions has created for our debt service schedule, and I'll note that because it's match maturity, this is really driven by the defeasance, which has already been accomplished, so nothing speculative here, is we have brought down that 2023 bullet, which you see that spike, we've chopped that spike in half roughly 48% of the 2016 D maturity has been taken out by defeasance. There's still a little bit of an increase in debt service from 2023 relative to other years. So we'll be going back to do cleanup either by taking out additional debt at the 2016 D issuance. There's also 2012 D, some other nuclear debt in there that we could use to shave down the P&I that'll come due in 2023.
And just to remind my fellow board members, the reason we have that large bullet was because we would have received the proceeds from sale of the additional 5% of summer 2 and 3 that would have paid that off. And so we have to deal with that bullet.
Yes, sir.
In our refinance or finance plan because it's just a large number and needs to be either spread out or refinanced or restructured.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be brief in my report because we've covered so much also already today, but the financing activities that Shawan talked about, again, I would like to compliment staff. I think they did a superb job on structuring the two. They were both contemplated in the business plan, and we have executed on that. And it's a good feeling to have created the business plan, contemplated those transactions, and have now we're well on our way to completing those transactions with the cash defeasance and the mini bond refinance set for mid-November. So I compliment staff on putting that program together and beginning to get it done. We met with members of the Horry County Legislative Delegation, as Chairman Ray mentioned, on October 28th, I think was the date of that. We had the event last night with the Berkeley County folks. It was a good event, a great opportunity to share elements of the business plan with folks, talk about it a little bit. You did not know that I was a drummer. I think I've proven to you that I am. I did not know that Barry Wen was in fact a professional dancer. And should be appearing on Dancing with the Stars. Barry, I did see you dancing with my wife at one point in time. I'm a little offended by that, and you and I need to talk about that. I'm kidding. Yeah, it was a fun event and a nice event, and good people, and glad we were able to do that. Otherwise, we've been completely consumed as a staff on working with the DOA and through the 4287 process, not only the initiation of the business plan, but as well the development of the reform plan. Work continues on the development of the reform plan. We can't talk publicly about that, but we are consumed in conducting that work. And staff, again, I think has done a fabulous job. I'm not good at this part. Babs, where are you? You want to stand up? Let's give Babs a standing ovation for her service to you. And that's basically all I've got. Yes, sir. Yes. Absolutely. Please do.
And just thank you from the board, and to the extent I can extend that to anyone else. I know my personal thanks to you for all the work you've done, over your career here at Santee Cooper. I've been here, I guess, for most or all of it. And, we've been through some, from the Santee River flooding litigation to the Good Sense litigation to all the power line related litigation, the car accidents. I mean, Babs has handled it all and just done a marvelous job. We've got, of course, some litigation going on now that is probably the trickiest yet. And Babs has been steady and a fantastic leader for us through that. And, like I think I told someone earlier, Babs has to tell you when she's mad and upset, and I really think she is mad and upset, but she has a way of being cool and calm and professional, and I've always appreciated that. I think it served us well. You know, she was president of the South Carolina Bar there for a term, is on a number of committees. I don't know them all. I just know she's chosen by government leaders and municipal, state, and otherwise to help them and advise them. And I think she's in high demand in that regard and does a super job. And, you know, we're going to miss you. And we do love you. And hope you'll remember how to get around here. We'd like to see you again. But with that, thank you, ma'am.
Well, thank you, and I'm assuming I can use you as a reference.
Well, tell me who you're going to refer to.
So Babs, you've been here as long as Cal's been on the board? There. Oh, I was going to say 73 years is a long time. I don't think you like them. Thank you, Babs. You're wonderful. That's really all I've got to report on. You know what we're busy doing. Yes, sir.
Mark, after you had made the presentation on the business plan to the board, probably the most frequent question I get is just how did you make a business plan that will keep our rates stable for 5 years? And we may just have seen part of that in that chart. You did. Part of that answer, which I think actually I don't recall seeing that before, but we had a lot of charts before. But could you speak to that? Because I think it is really critical. It is amazing, I think, that we can do this for 5 years.
Well, thank you for that question. It's really a combination of several blocks of savings. So you have to think of it in terms of a rectangle that's composed of several blocks and pieces that kind of offset each other and complete a 5-year savings picture. But the first block is an annuity, really, and that's locking in the 10% reduction in staffing that Santee Cooper has been able to accomplish since the beginning of 2017. That saves X amount of money per year. We anticipate locking that savings in, staying in that position. In fact, with the closure of Wynya, ultimately those staffing levels will go down and those savings will go up. But to begin with, we're locking in the 10% reduction in staffing. That's worth quite a bit of money annually, and that's stable on the bottom of the rectangle. The purchasing activity that had been done by Santee Cooper to purchase off the market as opposed to generate itself is estimated to save in the neighborhood of $140, $150 million a year, and we've locked that in for the first 3 years of that projection. So that's a chunk that is now locked in and secure. As we've discussed, otherwise we'd like to extend that at some point in time if we possibly could. We're going to have to wait a little while to do that, but we have locked in that. So that adds to the savings in the first 3 years. The cash defeasance that you just saw, the effect of that cash defeasance is really focused on the first 10 years from this point forward. So it's not a perpetual annuity, but it achieves a lot of debt service reduction in the first 10 years, and that's an element of the savings that is now, in fact, locked in. The refinancing that you saw Shawan talk about, I noticed that the net present value estimate was up to $33 million. That's fantastic. That's spread over 20 years. That's a net present value, so the future value is even greater than that. So that becomes an annuity, basically, to add to the savings level for the next 20 years. All of these things are parts and pieces that we're not just talking about, we're doing. They're putting in place. They're there already or shortly to be there already. The last element is the resource plan work that Charlie did in developing the business plan case. And you're familiar with the particulars of the resource plan changes. Resource plan savings don't happen overnight. They take a little bit longer to deal with the future of generating stations and things like that. So those savings really don't kick in materially for about 3 or 4 years, but they do kick in at that point in time and in fact expand savings. So they are in place. The direction is set. The the realization of those savings, of those particular savings, won't happen until a little bit further out, but they fill in that gap in the 5-year rate freeze once the fuel savings is not extended. We do hope to extend it, needless to say, but if it does go away, then those savings backfill that part of the rectangle, and it is the construction of that rectangle through the putting together of those multiple pieces that gives us the ability to eliminate the 7.2 or 7.5 or whatever it was that was talked about before. That's gone, and in its place is a 5-year rate freeze. I appreciate the question. It's a number of building blocks that we have been putting together, and they're firm.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I guess just before we adjourn, excuse me, I'd like to thank the staff. I think, as Mark pointed out, everybody's working extremely hard to get this reform plan done, and it's required a lot of long days and nights, and we really appreciate it. I'm gonna take a leap here and offer that the board would like to buy lunch for everybody at the Monk's Corner office one day before submission. Maybe I'd offer up the November 20th, which is the day before our meeting, and we'd like to come and bring lunch with us for everybody in Monk's Corner.
Okay.
So to show our appreciation.
That's fantastic.
I'll collect checks from the rest of my board members later. But we'll look forward to that. We do appreciate everyone's hard work, and we do thank you for that.
That would be deeply appreciated. It truly would. Thank you for that. We appreciate
Our
it.
pleasure. Any other comments?
I just think we've omitted mentioning that we now have a reform plan band.
That's right. That's right.
The reformers.
We didn't have to put it on our budget.
Yeah. Well, no, I was highly impressed with our reform plan band last night. They did a great job, and we'll look forward to some future opportunities to showcase their talents yet again.
Okay, super.
So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you much.